Welcome to the DX Today podcast, your daily deep dive into the AI ecosystem. I'm Chris, and joining me as always is Laura.
It is great to be here, Chris, and I have to say, today's story is one of those that looks like good news on the surface but gets stranger the longer you stare at it.
That is exactly the vibe I got reading the headlines yesterday. The May jobs report dropped on June 5th, and on paper it absolutely looked like a barn burner, didn't it?
It really did. American employers added 172,000 jobs in May, which was nearly triple what Goldman Sachs had forecast, and well above the Wall Street consensus of roughly 85,000.
So just to make sure our listeners catch the magnitude here, the economy beat expectations by almost double, and the unemployment rate held perfectly steady at 4.3%. That sounds like a healthy labor market to me.
On the headline, yes, and that is precisely the trap, because when analysts pulled the report apart, what they found underneath was a labor market quietly fracturing along some very specific artificial intelligence fault lines.
Okay, I want to push on that phrase, because fracturing is a strong word for a report that just tripled forecasts. What exactly are these fault lines that the headline number is hiding from us?
The clearest one is who is actually getting hired, and more importantly, who is not. The strength is concentrated in a few sectors, while hiring for junior and entry-level roles has gone remarkably soft across white-collar work.
So the top line jobs number is real, but it is masking a generational split. Walk me through the data, because I suspect the entry-level story is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable for a lot of people.
It does get uncomfortable. Research from Goldman Sachs found that over the past year, AI adoption shaved roughly 16,000 jobs off monthly payroll growth and nudged the unemployment rate up by about 1/10 of a percentage point.
16,000 a month does not sound dramatic in a country that just added 172,000, but compounded over a year, that is a serious headwind. Where is that drag actually landing the hardest?
It is landing squarely on the youngest workers. In the occupations most exposed to AI substitution, the unemployment gap between people under 30 and experienced workers aged 31 to 50 has widened sharply compared to pre-pandemic norms.
That is the part that worries me most, because the entry-level job has always been the on-ramp. If you automate the first rung of the ladder, you do not just hurt today's graduates, you break the whole climb.
Exactly, and the structural reason is almost painfully logical. Gen Z workers are disproportionately concentrated in routine white-collar roles, the data entry, the customer service, the legal support, the billing work, and those are precisely the tasks that AI does best.
Right, because a model does not get tired, does not need onboarding, and can summarize a contract or triage a support ticket in seconds. So the very jobs that used to teach people the business are the first to disappear.
That is the cruel irony of it, and the numbers on Outright Cuts back this up. According to the outplacement firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas, companies have announced nearly 50,000 job cuts this year that are directly linked to artificial intelligence.
50,000. And I want to put that in context for listeners, because a raw number floating in space does not mean much. How does that compare to the total volume of layoffs we have seen so far this year?
It is about 17% of the roughly 300,000 total job cuts announced so far in 2026. So nearly 1 in 5 layoffs this year now comes with an explicit AI label attached to it.
1 in 5 is a striking ratio, especially because companies historically have been reluctant to say the quiet part out loud. Admitting that a machine replaced a person is a public relations minefield, so seeing it stated openly tells me something has shifted.
It has shifted, and the tech sector is where it is most naked. At least 127,000 tech employees have been laid off since January. Total tech cuts passed 100,000 this year, and roughly 60% of those are attributed to AI.
So in the industry that builds these tools, 60% of the layoffs are being pinned on the tools themselves. There is a dark poetry to that. The people who taught the model how to code being the first ones automated out.
And here's where I want to complicate the doom narrative just a little, because the story is genuinely two-sided. It is not simply that AI is a wrecking ball erasing work, it is also redistributing where the demand goes.
Good, because I was about to play devil's advocate. If 172,000 jobs still appeared in May, the work is clearly not vanishing in aggregate. It is moving somewhere. Where is the new demand actually showing up?
It is showing up at the higher skill end. AI-related job postings have surged 340% since 2024, while traditional software engineering roles have actually declined about 15% over the same stretch of time.
So the demand curve is not collapsing, it is bending. Firms are pulling money out of the routine middle and pouring it into artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and cloud infrastructure roles that sit further up the value chain. That reshapes everything.
It reshapes everything, and it creates a brutal mismatch problem. The displaced billing clerk or the laid-off junior developer cannot simply teleport into a machine learning infrastructure job because those roles demand skills that take years and real money to build.
And that mismatch is exactly why the headline number can look so healthy while individual people feel like the floor is falling out. The aggregate is fine, but the distribution underneath it is being violently rearranged in real time.
That is the heart of it. Economists call this a composition effect, where the total stays stable but the underlying mix transforms completely. The danger is that policymakers read the 4.3% and conclude that everything is working fine.
Let me steelman the optimists for a second, though, because every previous wave of automation triggered this exact panic, and yet we kept inventing new categories of work that nobody could have predicted. Why should this time be different?
That is the most important question in the whole debate, and honestly, the honest answer is that we do not fully know yet. The bullish case says AI is just the next tractor, freeing humans for higher value creative and interpersonal work.
And the tractor analogy is seductive because agriculture went from half the workforce to about 1%, and we did not end up with mass permanent unemployment. We ended up with entirely new industries that the farmers could never have imagined.
Right, but the bears point to one crucial difference in tempo. The agricultural transition unfolded over a century, giving generations time to adapt. Whereas this displacement is compressing into a handful of years, and human retraining simply does not move at software speed.
That speed argument is the one I find hardest to wave away. A model can be deployed across 1 million workstations overnight, but a 35-year-old paralegal cannot become a cloud security architect overnight, no matter how motivated they are.
And that asymmetry is why so many economists are now arguing the policy response matters more than the technology itself. The cuts are happening regardless, so the real question becomes whether we build bridges fast enough for the people standing on the wrong side.
So what does a bridge even look like here? Because I hear a lot of vague talk about reskilling, but reskilling a billing clerk into a prompt engineer is not a weekend boot camp, and pretending otherwise feels almost insulting to those workers.
It does feel insulting, and the serious proposals go well beyond boot camps. They include wage insurance to cushion the income drop during transitions, employer subsidies for on-the-job training, and genuinely rethinking how we fund education for adults mid-career rather than only at 18.
And there is a timing wrinkle that makes the policy picture even messier. You mentioned earlier that this report actually pushes the Federal Reserve toward hiking rather than cutting rates, which seems backwards if the labor market is secretly weakening underneath.
It is a genuine paradox. A hot headline jobs number plus sticky inflation makes the Fed more likely to keep rates high. But high rates squeeze exactly the kind of borrowing that funds new hiring and startup formation, which could deepen the entry-level freeze.
So the very strength of the report could trigger a policy response that makes the hidden weakness worse. That is the kind of feedback loop that keeps economists awake at night, where the medicine for one symptom aggravates a completely different disease.
And it lands hardest on the cohort with the least power to absorb it. A new graduate facing both an AI-frozen entry-level market and a high-rate economy that discourages risk-taking and new venture creation is getting squeezed from two directions at once.
When you frame it that way, the 4.3% unemployment rate almost becomes a misleading comfort blanket. It tells the people in charge that the system is healthy right at the moment, when the on-ramp for the next generation is quietly closing.
That is the warning buried in this report, and it is why analysts kept using words like fracturing and bifurcation rather than just celebrating the beat. The average is fine, but averages have a way of hiding the people who are drowning.
So if I'm a listener trying to make sense of all this without panicking, what is the practical takeaway? Because I do not want us to leave people feeling helpless in the face of a trend this big and this fast.
The practical read is to move up the value chain wherever you can, toward judgment, relationships, and the messy human work that models still handle poorly, and to treat AI fluency not as a threat, but as the single most portable skill you can build right now.
That is a hopeful note inside a heavy story. The idea that the same technology displacing routine work is also the thing you can learn to ride. The people who pair human judgment with these tools seem to be the ones pulling ahead.
Exactly. And that is the pattern in every adoption study I have seen. It is rarely AI replacing humans outright in knowledge work. It is humans who use AI replacing humans who do not. And that distinction is where individual agency still genuinely matters.
Before we wrap, I want to ground this in something concrete because numbers can feel abstract. Can you give me a picture of what this actually looks like inside a single company that has leaned hard into automation this year?
Sure, and the pattern repeats almost everywhere you look. A mid-sized firm freezes its junior hiring, deploys an AI system across customer support or document review, and then quietly lets attrition shrink the team rather than running a dramatic mass layoff.
And that quiet version is almost harder to track than a splashy layoff announcement because there is no press release, no headline, just a job opening that simply never gets posted and a graduate who never gets the callback.
Precisely. And that is why economists worry the official statistics undercount the real effect. A layoff shows up in the data immediately, but a hiring freeze is invisible, a job that quietly ceases to exist before anyone ever counted it.
I think that is the line I will carry out of this conversation, that the report is less a verdict and more a warning shot. The headline says everything is fine, but the smart move is to listen to what the fault lines are whispering.
Beautifully put, and I would add one last thing for our listeners to sit with. A single month of data is noisy, so the real story will be whether this entry-level gap keeps widening through the summer, and that is the number to watch.
That is a perfect place to leave it, with our eyes on the trend rather than the headline. Thank you, Laura, for untangling a report that turned out to be far more interesting and far more consequential than its top line suggested.
Always a pleasure, Chris, and thank you to everyone listening for thinking through this with us. Because these are the stories that quietly reshape millions of lives long before they ever make the front page of anyone's morning newspaper.
That's all for today's episode of the DX Today podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.